What's up, sons and daughters? We are back for week 6 of Lock to Saturday. I'm here with the crew, Robert, Ed, and Chris. Ed with a big yawn to start us off, dude. It's only 9:54 p.m.
Dude, I got up early. I went duck hunting this morning. It was so
Wait,
much fun, but I'm exhausted. I was up at 3:50.
wait. You're gonna say you would go duck hunting and had the ducks right behind me in my background?
Yeah, it might not be a good omen for the boys.
Shoot, maybe not. Maybe I need to change some thoughts. I'll stick with it.
Yeah, your
Um,
picks are toast now. Just no way
well,
around it.
Are they toast? Because right now I have the best record of anyone on the Locks of Saturday at a slightly above 500, 15 and 13. Brett, who is not with us tonight, he's moving into a new house. Congratulations to Brett. And he's at 13 and 15. Chris at 12. And Chris, you're a little bit behind him. Robert, you're a little further behind him. Ed, you're way behind him. But we'll figure it out. We're not even halfway through. We'll figure it out. And we have a really fun slate for this week. Like, I think this is going to be a really fun weekend of college football simply because of the game that's kicking us off. College game day is headed to Lawrence, Kansas for a football game where Texas Christian, one of the somewhat surprised teams, but I'll tell you, Chris, you were up on the Horned Frogs all year long. They are 7-point favorites against the undefeated Kansas Jayhawks. This game is at noon on FS1. The over-under is a whopping 67.5. Ed, kick us off, man.
Yeah, this was tough because I've really enjoyed Kansas and what they've got going on. They have a dark horse Heisman candidate playing quarterback. It's been really fun to see a basketball school. Actually, if you really think about it, across the country, there's a lot of basketball schools playing some really good football, but Kansas has been at the forefront of that. But I'm going to go with TCU here. After what they did last week to Oklahoma, I think they're riding high. They're playing really, really good offense right now. And I think the whole game day thing and the success maybe will start to wear on Kansas a little bit. They've beaten some good teams, but I don't think they've beaten anybody of the caliber of some of the teams TCU's been able to handle so far. So I'm going to go with TCU. I don't love that it's a full touchdown, but I think it might just be too much going on in the world of Kansas right now for them to come out on top in this one. So I'm going to go with the touchdown for TCU.
Shoot, that's why I never go on mute because I'm always going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to go with TCU. I'm with you. I'm on the Horned Frogs for this one. I don't know if you can see the hand signal with the background, but little Horned Frog there. The reason I really like TCU is because not only have they outperformed themselves on offense, they've done so on defense as well. I think that'll be a little bit too much for Kansas. They probably should have lost to Iowa State last week. They didn't play well offensively. They struggled to move the ball. They would get 1 or 2 first downs and then couldn't finish drives. Iowa State's kicker missed 3 pretty easy kicks. That's not going to happen against TCU. This TCU offense has been something really special so far this season. They are number 5 in EPA per pass, number 4 in EPA per rush, number 5 in early down EPA. That's first and second down. And if they don't pick up the first down on those, that's okay because they're number 13 in third and fourth down EPA. Compare that to the Kansas defense, who is 82nd in pass and 58th in rush EPA. They're 117th in echo rate, which is basically is controlling the down and distance. Are you winning on each and every play? They're not doing that very much. And they're also a really, really poor third and fourth down defense. So although I love the Kansas story, I said it was going to be like 2007 this year. I didn't mean like this, but I'm going to go TCU in this one. I just think they're the better team. And I think after this week, TCU might be the favorite in the Big 12, depending on how Texas looks and if Quinn Ewers is back to full health. But I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs as road favorites.
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. And for a lot of good reasons, but Sam, you kind of alluded to it to start off with just being on TCU. Before the season even started, we were looking at kind of random teams. And, when we started off the podcast for this season, I talked about the TARP metric, which is an Action Network driven metric that's transferring assets and returning production, the kind of different way to look at who is valuable to start off the season. And the number one team in total value there was TCU. And I was just very curious of what that meant. Obviously, with Sonny Dykes being the new head coach there. And usually it's like, yeah, you have a lot of returning type production, but in a new system, new regime, like what does that really, really mean? So that was, obviously something to look at. I eventually went towards Mississippi State for my kind of, value over under on wins. But in that, Kansas was number 5 in Power 5. I think they were in the top 10 in total TARP. So another way of identifying these valuable type teams that didn't necessarily look great. And this isn't, a dictator of success across the board, but very interesting that each of these teams kind of rose to the top in the Big 12 to start off, just based off of just seeing how, I guess, experience, mature, whatever have you, with those two teams. And, that's where I just don't see the amount of separation to justify a touchdown spread with TCU being a road favorite at Kansas, because literally nobody saw either of these teams coming out of nowhere. And so I just don't see that there is a justification there to rate and value Kansas so low. I love good home underdogs, especially if it's over or at a touchdown. I feel like there's incredible value there. The SRS ratings have these teams each also pretty dead even. I think TCU is 6th overall. Kansas is 9th. So there's just not a lot of separation, not that much that justifies a touchdown, like I said before. Against common level Power 5 type opponents, I just feel like KU, you mentioned that they don't have a stellar defense, but they have a good enough type defense. Granted, TCU's offense is pretty solid, but this also doesn't factor in that Kansas is a very efficient ground type based running team, and TCU's defense is nothing to laud about either, too. So I do feel like Kansas is going to be able to put up points, which, if you look, the over-under is 67.5 points. I think Vegas believes there's going to be points in this game as well. So I do feel like Kansas can keep pace. Another one is I love fading the public. And right now, the action volume is on TCU public-wise at 63%. I hate taking open public road favorites. I love home dogs that are being undervalued. And I think the number one thing I'm looking forward to is that 9 a.m. panoramic into College Game Day, and it's going to be dead silent, and all of a sudden they're going to load into the Rock Chalk chant. It's going to be kind of creepy, but also kind of cool at the same time. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most. I don't know if they'll do it right off the bat, but usually when they set up in a new area, they kind of do whatever is their home chant. So that's going to lead the top of the College Game Day broadcast. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So Rock Chalk.
Yeah, I've made this point on the podcast before, but there are just some teams out there, and this is across the board, not just with college football, but with a lot of these sports in general, where you have these extreme surprise teams, and it can take a little bit of time for these projection models that the sports books use to catch up to that. And so, like, for example, I bet on my beloved Orioles to make the playoffs on July 22nd. At that time, they were only 4.5 games out of a playoff spot. They were one of the hottest teams in the league, and yet those odds were still plus 1,500. And teams with worse records, such as the White Sox, Rangers, and Angels, all had better odds at the time, even though the Orioles were a better team and had displayed that at the time. Granted, the Orioles still did not make the playoffs, sadly. They still finished way closer than those other teams and then other teams ahead of them. So my point being is that while the Orioles did not achieve that feat, the value there was insane because they were still being undervalued. And I think Kansas is a similar team, because the projections had them being absolutely god-awful. And so I think there's still a bit of that skew in those projections today. For example, they are still plus 1,000 to win the Big 12 right now, while all other teams that they are tied for first with all have much better odds. And they even have worse odds right now than Baylor, who just lost and didn't look very good doing it last week. I think it'll take a little bit of time for the models to catch up. And so you can also see how Kansas has outperformed these projections because they're 5-0 against the spread. and they are covering by an average of 15.5 points a game. So they are absolutely killing it on the spread. Honestly, I'm not really sure if they're going to win this game. But I just don't think being a 7-point home underdog really makes a ton of sense. I think it's a bit of an overreaction to how TCU handled Oklahoma last week, as well as the models, like I said, not catching up. I think ultimately Kansas does lose a heartbreaker because I do think TCU is just a hair more talented. But I think they'll cover. So I see this as like a 3 or 4 point win for TCU. So I'm taking Kansas to cover.
Should be a fun game. I think it's awesome that college football, and I feel like game day has kind of caught on to this as well. It's about more than Alabama A&M. It's about more than USC being back. It's about more than Ohio State. Like, it's about all of these teams that sometimes aren't great at football, sometimes really suck, but they deserve light too. So I think a TCU Kansas for game day is really awesome. And if you see our nice background, our overlay, the game scores coming up here on YouTube. By the way, if you're listening to this on Spotify and you would like to see our devilishly handsome faces and all these awesome graphics, head over to YouTube. We're on YouTube. All This on Saturday podcast, a bunch of content is up on YouTube. And a special thanks to the newest member of the Locks of Saturday team, our brand new podcast producer, Mr. Dom Bolts, Virginia Tech student himself. So everyone, welcome Dom. What's up, dude?
What's up, guys? How you doing? Dom, like you said, student at Tech, excited to be on board. Hopefully make the podcast a little better. Maybe throwing a pick every now and then makes people some money, you know what I'm saying?
You know
Let's
what?
go.
We need it.
You
If
can't-
couldn't tell.
You can't have a gambling podcast without some random guy named Dom chiming in on his random picks that he
Exactly.
has. And I think that makes us more official of a degenerate level podcast, especially when it's a name powered by Dom Bolts. Dom Bolts picks. That sounds legit to me. I don't know about you.
So what's your one pick this week?
You know, just thinking about the game we were just talking about, I love Kansas. I mean, they're America's team right now. Everyone's on Kansas. I mean, their team total wins for the season was like 3.5. They're already at 5. Everyone loves them right now. So give me Kansas.
I did say it was going to be like 2007.
We all like Dom already, going with Kansas. Smart man.
Awesome. Well, Dom's doing some awesome work for us. And this production is going to only enhance week over week this season. So thanks so much, Dom. And we're going to go to our next game. As we were talking about the little guys, talking about the big boys again, Tennessee and Heisman hopeful Hendon Hooker are 3-point favorites in Death Valley against the LSU Tigers, an LSU team that we wrote off early in this season after a tough loss to Florida State. All of a sudden, LSU's back in the top 25. Ed, who do you got between the Vols and the Tigers?
I hate that LSU is in the top 25, by the way. That is ridiculous. Brian Kelly and the mess that it has been so far, and he still somehow has in the top 25. It props to him, I guess. I mean, the guy clearly knows what he's doing.
They're not
that good, but you know what? He's a 4-1, and he's got him in the top 25. But I'm on Tennessee all the way. I've been on Tennessee all year. I have a preseason Hendon Hooker to win the Heisman bet in that still has life. He's been phenomenal for them, and I think Tennessee's a really, really good team. They're 8th right now in the AP poll. I realistically could see them somehow squeaking into the playoff when it's all said and done. I like this Tennessee team a lot. So I'm going to go with them, even on the road by a field goal. May even consider, I don't know if I'll do it or not. We'll see if I do it, but I may consider even buying some more points there and having them win by like 6.5, something like that. I like Tennessee's offense, man. Hendon Hooker's absolutely killing it. So go Vols. No more Brian Kelly in the top 25.
Last week I would have picked Tennessee. I was on Tennessee. I said Tennessee plus 10 against Florida. Easy bet. It looked easy, and then there was a bit of a backdoor cover. Now, the old Sam, the Sam who's done poor, if you follow my Twitter on gambling so far, I would have said ride Tennessee. That was a backdoor cover. They should be fine this week. But now I'm looking at it, and they kind of let a quarterback who wasn't very good, but was big and athletic, score some points on him and come back in that game. And now they're going up against a quarterback who is big and athletic, on the road in one of, if not the toughest place to play in the country at LSU. And look, I know that was a really unfortunate loss LSU had at the beginning of the year to a Florida State team that's really good, not great, but still good. But this LSU team's on a roll. They had a really good win against Mississippi State. Their rush defense is really, really good. 8th in EPA per rush defense so far. And I just look at this matchup and I look at like, what does LSU do well and what does Tennessee do well? And there's no obvious, like, there's nothing obvious that either one of these teams do that's a huge mismatch against the other. So although I really like Tennessee this year, I really like Hendon Hooker. I'm going to go with the home dogs here. I'm going to go LSU +3. And if you look at this as well, Tennessee games have gone over in 9 of 10, which means A, they are really good offensively, but B, they're really poor defensively still. And on the road, don't have the crowd behind you. I think LSU is going to be able to get some points, even though their offense isn't great. I could see this game coming down to a really wild and crazy finish. So I'm going to take the points and the home team in that scenario. Another factor, and maybe the biggest factor of them all, massive sandwich game for Tennessee. You have game day in the big atmosphere at home against Florida. You win in a thrilling fashion. It's awesome. You're feeling good. Now you have to travel, one of the furthest travels you can have in the SEC, from Knoxville to Baton Rouge. Travel down there to play them. Only next week you have Bama coming to town. Huge letdown spot right here for Tennessee with Bama on the horizon. Give me LSU. In the words of Coach O, go Tigers.
I'm in agreement, Sam.
Let's go.
LSU +3. The big thing for me is I'm just getting the better team at home as a home underdog, similar to what we just talked about with Kansas. Emphasis here is on the defensive side of the ball for LSU, also with the added element that they are in Death Valley. So while it's not a night crowd in Death Valley, it still is there, and that's a tough environment to not only be, I guess, win on the road in the SEC, but to win there on the road in the SEC. That's tough to do, and I just don't know if Tennessee, until I see them be able to win dominantly on the road against common to, I would say, mid to high level SEC opponents, I'm going to just take the home team, in this case, a good home team. You mentioned that there wasn't an obvious advantage kind of mismatch. I can see that, but I also somewhat disagree. It's obviously the Tennessee offense versus for the disparity versus the LSU defense. And to me, that is the largest marginal difference, where the LSU defense rates out higher than the Tennessee offense. So they have an 89.6 composite rating on PFF on defense, and Tennessee has an 80 composite rating on offense. So that's a somewhat of a significant, almost 10-point gap. That's not as big on the opposite side. Tennessee's defense is rated at a 70.9 and LSU's offense is rated at a 73. So a much closer matchup. So that in and of itself, with LSU being higher, just one other notch in the belt for thinking that LSU is just the better team. Everything going into this, the perception to me doesn't, I guess, equate to the reality of the spread. I think these things are coming into the line, and I think they're wrong. Tennessee coming off of the bye week last week, they just beat Florida at home. Everything with Hendon Hooker being a Heisman contender. The LSU week 1 loss with the Florida State stink, I think, is still on him a little bit. The fact that my own captain's pick of the week and taking LSU last week, thinking that they were going to blow out Auburn, didn't happen at night in Jordan-Hare. I now know that was because Ed also took LSU. So I fault Ed completely for that pick going awry. And the biggest thing is just people just don't like Brian Kelly. And so they're just going to constantly deflate his value. And reality is LSU is good. They're good on defense. That's usually pretty good when it means that they're at home. And I have to feel like, you mentioned the sandwich game, but I think another one too is Tennessee kind of feeling themselves a little bit as well. They had a whole off week to think about this. But at the end of the day, just give me Death Valley, give me the Tigers. That's just where the value is on this one is too. Interesting enough, the over under being at 64, I have to believe that that's because I assume they think that LSU is going to be able to score points. And the matchup just shows that it's going to be there. So I do think that LSU is going to surprise a lot of people on their offensive side of the ball is what I'm trying to get at.
Does that still feel kind of high? Like Robert, as you round us out here, that's a really high over under for this game.
Way too high, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. And I mean, it's because I don't feel great about LSU's offense. I mean, I don't know. Chris, I don't know how you can say that they're the better team when, they just squeaked out a game against Auburn that their head coach is a dead man walking. Like, I don't know, man.
I mean, Tennessee need like double overtime to beat Pitt, and Pitt's a good team, but they're not.
We're forgetting about night voodoo that happens at Jordan Hare. It wasn't just a Bo Nix thing. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of the SEC. Weird stuff happens there.
Which only works unless we pick them, because when we do pick Jordan Hare voodoo, Penn State goes in there and waxes them.
I didn't pick that.
Night Jordan Hare voodoo is what is the differentiator.
True. It's one of the only ones I got right this year. First instinct, definitely go with Tennessee. I like a smaller spread here for the higher ranked team, even on the road. I think the matchup to watch is Hendon Hooker against that LSU defense that you guys have, really hit home that they are really solid, especially up front in the front seven. Now they've only really played, I would say, two, I'll call capable quarterbacks this year. And that's Jordan Travis from Florida State and it's Will Rogers from Mississippi State. They beat Rogers. They lost to Travis. I think that this Hooker matchup looks a little bit more like the Jordan Travis matchup than the Will Rogers matchup. And so the difference between Travis and Hooker versus Rogers is deep balls. So Jordan Travis and Hendon Hooker both take a lot more shots. According to Pro Football Focus, they both throw deep balls, which is passes of 20 plus yards on just under 20% of their pass attempts. And they both grade over 91 out of 100 on those passes. Whereas Will Rogers only throws deep balls on less than 7% of all pass attempts. So Mississippi State's offense was kind of more of though it's an air raid, quote unquote, it's more of just a bunch of dink and dunk passes. They don't take a lot of shots. And so with LSU being so strong up front, even though Mississippi State's not really running the ball, they're still keeping everything close to the line of scrimmage, and those guys just feasted. Whereas Florida State, they bring some variety, they stretch the field vertically and horizontally, and they test that LSU secondary. And they did enough to win. And so I expect Tennessee to do the same thing because they do. Hendon Hooker is one of, if not the best deep ball passer in the country. That's always been his strength. Got a cannon of an arm and he's accurate down the field. And I think that this will be enough to give them the win, probably by a touchdown, especially since he can keep plays alive with his feet as well. That's something Jordan Travis could do as well, was he's very mobile. And so I think that those two factors combined, I just think it gets it done. So falls by a touchdown.
We lost Ed. He'll come back. He might be having some internet issues. There he is. Well, guys, where will we be betting these? Betting them all on DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And I'll tell you what, I told you guys this last week. It's still the same this week. It's the absolute best place. If you are a new user to sports betting, if you want to get into it, this is the most user-friendly, risk-averse way to get into it. Because with DraftKings, when you sign up now, bet just $5 and get $200 in free bets if the team that you bet on wins. Really, really simple. And if that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings with stepped up same game parlays. Right now, for every leg you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100% with payouts bigger than ever. why bet on football anywhere else? To make things even sweeter, you can throw down on same game parlays. That's the phrasing. You can do it once per game day all season long. This isn't a one-time use thing. You can do this all season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the promo code SOS when you sign up. That's promo code SOS to get $200 in free bets if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code SOS only at DraftKingsSportsbook.com, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Please see the show notes for details. All right, fellas. This is a fun game. This is as fun as football gets. The Washington State Cougars plus 13 at what we can kind of start to, if Alabama's the evil empire, then what's USC to college football? They used to be the evil empire, but now they're more like the wicked stepsister.
To get super nerdy in the Star Wars lexicon, they're the trade organization that's in
The
there
Trade
as well. They're
Federation?
partners.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
they're very
That's
much
good.
a part of that too. So very corporate, but still, just as bad of associated entity as they are with the empire.
To get a little nerdy as well, the Lannisters from Game of Thrones, House Lannister, they're definitely USC fans, and USC, they're USC alums, like they're old money USC alums for sure. For all my Game of Thrones and House of Dragon fans out there, does that make sense? House Lannisters USC.
Yes, I'm in the middle of rewatching that right now, and it's been super fun. So that's a
might say
great
the
pull by
Targaryen.
you.
I might say they're the Targaryens. Once great,
Really?
faded away,
No,
kind
the
of off on
Targaryens.
their own, coming back, and when they come back, they're going to absolutely destroy everything and cause so
The
much pain and
Targaryens feel
fire.
very Ohio State to me.
We're going off the rails here.
Yeah,
This is great.
This is getting interesting.
That
really
was the
quick.
next bullet point. Game of Thrones universe podcast. That's
Shame.
no. But in all
Sons
seriousness,
of Thrones.
this game is 7:30 p.m. on Fox. The over/under is 66. Ed, Washington State or USC?
Yeah, I'm not a huge Pac-12 gambler, I will admit, but I'm on Washington State here. I really like what USC has offensively. They've been pretty solid. Completely across the board. Jordan Addison has been as advertised. Caleb Williams has been as advertised. They're doing what you would expect them to do. But I like this Washington State team. They're 4-1 against the spread. They're 4-1 in their record. Cam Ward's been pretty good out of the transfer portal for them. And, even in their only loss to Oregon, they lost 44-41. So they're hanging around with the competition that they're playing, beating the teams they should. And I think I do kind of like the over in this one as well. There's going to be a lot of points, but I don't know about USC yet. If the line was closer to even if it was 12, I would probably take USC. But at 13, I think Washington State can hang around. We've seen a lot of that recently, teams hanging around in these big spread games. So I need to see a little bit more out of USC. We're only in week 5 for me to, have confidence that they're going to blow somebody out that has had success so far this year against other Power 5 programs. So I'm going to go with Washington State, mainly because it's just a really big spread. And, I'll probably be totally wrong. And Caleb Williams will throw 8 touchdowns and Jordan Addison will throw 3 himself as well. So who knows? But I'm going to go with Washington State to cover a pretty big spread.
You know what, Ed? I've been on the Cougars since the offseason. I took them over 5.5 wins. They're easily going to get that. It looks like they're already at 4. And I'm on them again here. I do not think they will win this game. They will probably lose it by 10, 12 points, something like that. But 13 is a little bit high for me. And the reason is because USC's been a good team this year. And I think there's this idea floating around that USC's beating everybody by 30, 40 points. That's not what's happening. USC's margin of victory this season has been a little bit lower then you would kind of think they won by 13 at Stanford, not a very good Stanford team. They won by 3 at Oregon State, a good Oregon State team, but not even close to the talent level and speed and athleticism that USC has. 17-point winners against Arizona State, who is an abysmal football program right now. So now saying they're going to beat Washington State by more than 13 points, a good Washington State team who is much improved defensively. And oh yeah, they run the ball pretty darn well. Number 25 in EPA per rush offense against a USC defense that they create a lot of turnovers, but they cannot stop the run. They're one of the worst run defenses in the country at 118th in EPA per rush defense. So I like Washington State in this one to at least keep it close and make it a game. I think Cam Ward's a really darn good quarterback, and they are building a culture in Pullman, Washington of defensive, hard-nosed football. It's completely different than what we saw with Mike Leach, but it's working up there. It really is working. Another thing that I wanted to point out is last week, Washington State, really impressive 28-9 win over Cal, a good Cal team that'll probably finish over 500. Cam Ward had 2 interceptions in the end zone for that game. That game could have been an absolute blowout. It could have been a 42-9 football game. So I think this Washington State team might be a little bit better than what people think they are. That win at Wisconsin doesn't mean as much anymore because Wisconsin's terrible. But I really like this Washington State team. So I'm going Wazoo plus 13.
I really wanted to take Wazoo just to fade, kind of keep that USC bias stink off of me. And hopefully that would mean that USC would win.
Emotional hedge.
Emotional hedge. You named it there. I was actually at, back in 2013, I was at the Wazoo game at the Coliseum where Lane Kiffin lost 10-7, I think it was. And then the following week was the ASU lost tarmac firing event too. And I remember all the fire lane signs that were posted up all over the campus as well. That was good times. But for me, this is something to where I think both with some metric graphs I've seen on Twitter as well as S&P Plus had this at about USC minus 10 in terms of the analytical rundown in the matchup. That's close and near the 13-point spread. The reality for me is, and you named that with USC's defense, their biggest Achilles heel is their rush defense overall. But I just don't think that Wazoo has the running offense to be able to exploit that matchup. They're 95th overall in SRS rated rushing offense and 75th rated overall in passing offense. And that's, other than the absolute track meet that kind of ended up being with the Oregon game, you haven't really seen that with the other matchups as well. And you have to score to keep up with USC. And I do feel like at home against equivalent and just basically Power 5 type competition, regardless of who their opponent is right now, I think they're capable of putting up 40 on anybody if they can get that kind of game plan to hit and they're in alignment and they're just doing what they do. And I remember watching them last weekend, and I'm just the team speed difference for USC when they're in just fully clicking as an offense is really special to watch. Caleb Williams to Jordan Addison is an awesome kind of dynamic there as well. And just, I don't think that I'm probably saying this and Wazoo is going to explode on offense, but just, you have to be able to have the ability to score points. We're going to allude to probably this when we get to the VT game. You got to score points in college football to keep up with the best teams. And I just don't think they'll be able to score. I just don't know if they'll be able to score enough. So the other thing was just understanding what Lincoln Riley brings to the table. And you named it earlier, Sam, in terms of just his teams haven't necessarily ever historically blown other teams out. So that is the one thing to look at but it's on the margins in this game. So it's his historic margin of victory in conference games from when he was at OU. And we talked about it last week in terms of OU's talent level on offense, at least being equivalent to what USC currently has. 22-26 against the spread. But that margin of victory is at 12.2. So it's like right there on the verge of the 13-point spread here. So it's literally, to me, this is a 50-50 coin flip. At the end of the day, I don't like taking road dogs that I don't think can win. So I don't like. I think of it like a wet blanket approach to betting on a backdoor cover more so than having confidence that Wazoo can just either A, keep this game to the very end and it's basically like an end of game field goal situation, or win outright. And I just, like I said, I'm probably going to look like an idiot when Wazoo wins this game outright in a surprise game. But I just don't see, at least on paper, a scenario where Wazoo has a glide path other than just USC having a miserable night, turnovers, you name it. But the matchup isn't there, at least for them to be able to, at least on paper, look like they can win this game outright. And so I'm regretfully laying the points. I'm taking the Trojans at home. I got my USC Pac-10 basketball hat on here, in support for my Trojans here, but I just couldn't confidently take Wazoo thinking that they're going to score points on the road.
Yeah, I'd be more tempted to take this line if it was 14 or more, but it's not. I think that, the points you guys made earlier, I do think Wazoo is a legit team, and I think that, they have turned heads for a good reason, but I think that this is not a good matchup for them. And I don't know, it is hard to tell what they have defensively, because I do agree that is an emphasis, but at the same time, the only really, I'll even say above average offense they've played was Oregon, and they gave up 44. I love Cam Ward, really
to
do.
Bo Nix.
Right, to Bo Nix.
We'll get to Bo Nix later in this podcast. Don't worry about it.
Yes, we will. I love Cam Ward, and I'm sad Brett's not on this podcast because that's his guy. He absolutely adores Cam Ward. He brings a lot of good things to the table, but he's very turnover prone. He has 7 interceptions in 5 games, and he's also been sacked 14 times. And that's a bad combo because USC's defense, if you're an NFL fan, I like to think of USC's defense as like the Trayvon Diggs of defenses. Trayvon Diggs being a corner from the Cowboys where you look up and he's probably given up 100 yards to your favorite receiver, but he's also picked off 2 passes. And so he's a stat sheet stuffer, but he's also giving up a lot of yards. And that's sort of what USC's defense is. They give up a lot of yards, but they feed on big plays. So they are number 1 in the FBS right now in interceptions, and they are 5th in sacks. And as I said earlier, Cam Ward, a lot of picks, a lot of sacks. I think USC will just force too many negative plays for Wazoo to keep up with this USC offense that, while maybe not scoring as much, has managed to take care of the ball well. So I think USC wins this by 21 or more.
It'll be a really fun game. I think you're looking at 2 quarterbacks that a lot of people want to tune in and watch. Cam Ward, obviously a lot of hype coming from the FCS level. A guy that the Hokies probably looked at to getting to come to Blacksburg. And then Caleb Williams, obviously, doesn't need to be said that he's in the Heisman conversation, that he's just really darn good. So it should be a fun game. All right, one more Pac-12 game. You guys ready for this one? Because I sure am. The Utah Utes are 4.5-point favorites at UCLA. This game will take place on Fox at 3:30 p.m. The over-under is 65. Another high game total for this one. The Utes and the Bruins. Ed, who we got?
I'm on UCLA here. I'm 1-0 betting against Utah so far this year, back to week 1. So I'm going to continue to bet against Utah. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson has been the quarterback at UCLA for 10 years.
Yep.
And I think he finally figured it out this time. So I expected him to be what he has been in his career, and he has been significantly better than that. And it's been a pleasant surprise. I mean, he's actually been better than Cam Rising has been for Utah. If you really just take those 2 stats and line them up right next to each other, Thompson-Robinson's got over 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 1 pick. And an extremely high QBR. So he's been playing really, really good football for the Bruins. And that is why I'm going to take them as a 4.5-point home underdog. They're coming off of a really good win. They're the home team in this game. I mean, everything to me just points at them. I mean, they were able to put up 40 and win by 8 against Washington last week. They're kind of riding high, and they're coming in with 4.5 points to play with. So I'm going to take UCLA, led by a good quarterback, playing good ball right now, and the 4 points at home is very appealing to me. So UCLA.
I'm not betting against Utah ever, really, ever. I really like UCLA.
Yeah,
I
we
had
know.
No, I had Washington last week, and I was watching that game. I was like, oh my gosh, like UCLA has dudes that make plays, and DTR is fun to watch. This is what we were promised with him, right? Like, he's a difference maker, and this is a really good UCLA team. But let's kind of look at this from a holistic standpoint. UCLA's 2022 win total was set at 8.5, which a lot of people thought was a little bit high, but 8.5. They already have 5 wins. Okay. 7 games left on their schedule. They have to play Utah this game, Oregon, and USC. So even if UCLA was to get the over in their win totals, they would still have those 3 losses, presumably, right? To Utah, Oregon, and USC, who are 3 more talented, better teams, right? Do we really think UCLA is like a 10-win team? Do we think they're going to beat UCLA and Oregon? But probably not. Are we overreacting to them a little bit? Probably, right? Because if their over-under win total was set at 8.5 and they still have those 3 teams left, that means we probably expected them to start this season 5-0. I mean, they played 4 cupcakes. They almost lost to South Alabama, and then they beat a Washington team who's better than we expected, but that Washington team still has some holes in their team. So I think this is a good UCLA team. They're probably better than we gave them credit for. I think we've kind of forgot that Chip Kelly's really good at coaching football. But they're going to lose a game this year, and this is probably it. I don't care that they're playing at home in the Rose Bowl because like 25 people show up to those games. So there is no home environment at all there. And Utah's been beating the ever-living crap out of people. Since that Florida game, they beat Southern Utah, which this doesn't count, but they beat them by 66. They beat San Diego State by 28. They beat Arizona State by 21, and they beat Oregon State by 26. They're not just winning, they're dominating games. This is what they do. They don't let up on the gas pedal. When they bring in subs in the 4th quarter, those subs still play really, really well. Don't overthink it. Utah's a college football playoff caliber team. They're really, really special this year. 4.5 is not nearly enough points. Bet them. Yep. That's all I got.
I must have really overthought this one because I'm also taking UCLA plus 4.5 at home. And I take that begrudgingly because I hate UCLA. But I feel like this is another one where the public is kind of not properly valuing what UCLA is as a football team right now. It's kind of that preseason carryover. Utah, obviously, they had that blemish to start off the season, but they were higher rated coming out. And, UCLA was preseason unranked, and it took them a while to even get momentum at their current phone record to break into the AP top 25. So this is a lot of public preseason type perception. And for them to be at this point, a 4.5 point road favorite versus a team like UCLA. But the one thing I took away from that matchup from Utah facing Florida in the beginning of the season is this the type of team that has a tough time with a strong quarterback that can run and a strong rushing dynamic between the quarterback and the running back, which is, that's what UCLA is. That's their strength, is DTR getting essentially in space and just creating plays. And we saw that. And that was the same thing that Richardson did week 1 to them as well. He basically made plays with the feet to keep Florida in that game the entire time. And I don't know if that's just a one-time fluke, but it is the common denominator. And I think that DTR is a better overall athlete than Richardson is, and he's more experienced, at least as a quarterback. They might have equivalent athleticism. They're both really dynamic runners. And so I'm just going to go with that common denominator as what is going to tip the scales to UCLA, at least taking them as a home dog. in terms of SRS and PFF, UCLA actually rates out across the board as the better team. And those are opponent adjusted metrics for the most part, at least on SRS. So they're also, at least metrically, the better team. I do believe that Utah is obviously a really strong football team, but UCLA is it's not like they are a soft 4-0. I think they're a very solid program. Also, just under Chip Kelly, we always forget, like you said, that he's actually a pretty good coach. And he's been there since 2018, so he has some sample size here. But just against conference opponents, 2014, that's 58% against the spread. As an underdog, he's 14-11-2, so 56. So you are getting some plus value there. It's not heavily skewed, but it still is plus value. But if anybody has significant trend to look at, it's Kyle Whittingham. I feel like he's been at Utah since the state was founded. But as an away favorite, he's 26-29. That's 47%. So that's negative value there in terms of their ability to perform against opponents where they are a favorite team on the road. So the last thing I looked at, and the one thing I usually like to do, is just when in doubt, fade the public. 67% of the action right now is on Utah. So I think that feeds into the narrative I talked about beforehand in terms of just perception of these teams. It fed into the narrative last time when, what is it? Your sissy blue shirts and LSU coming on the road think they're going to dominate. And what did UCLA do? They brought them back to earth. I don't think Utah is going to have that much hubris coming into this game, but it's something where UCLA is not going to get slapped around in what I consider to be a pretty empty stadium. So it'll be an echo to the slap. You'll be able to hear it all the way throughout the Rose Bowl. But give me begrudgingly the Bruins. They are good. I hate saying it out loud, but it does help. It's like therapeutic.
I think my fear here for Utah is kind of what you were talking about, Sam, with Tennessee is the fear of a letdown. Because let's not forget, Utah is hosting USC next Saturday. And that's a game they've had circled on their calendar for the whole offseason, really.
It's the game. It's the game in the Pac-12.
Really, ever since Lincoln Riley took that job, Utah's had that game circled, right? And so, I would have some fear about them kind of trotting into a top 20 kind of quiet stadium and maybe laying an egg a little bit. And yeah, UCLA, they've proven that they're no slouch. You guys have talked about it. Chip Kelly, DTR, like those guys have been together for 5 years. You add on the fact that like they have Charbonnet at running back and Jake Bobo, like all of these guys are veteran players. They've all been playing college football a long time. For a coach that has been coaching in college football for a long time, they're experienced. And granted, that's the strength for Utah too. It's why Sam loves them so much, is because they have so much experience and so much stability. My point here is not necessarily that UCLA is better. My point is that it's enough of a toss-up that I'm going to take the points for the home team here. And so I think 4.5 at home for UCLA, where I do think they can compare in areas to Utah. With that big game looming for Utah, take the points.
It'll be a really, really big game. It'll be a really fun one. One that won't be so important, and probably not as fun, will be when our beloved Hokies travel up to the House of Horrors. That is, Robert, what is the field? Acupuncture field? What is it?
That was good.
Acrisure.
Yeah, I thought it was Acrisure, but it's Acrisure.
Acrisure. Well, they pronounce
Acrisure.
everything a little bit differently in Pittsburgh. So.
Look, what's
the Yinzer pronunciation of Acrisure?
Yeah, well, the Hokies are going there. They're 14.5-point dogs. They just got their tails whipped by Carolina. Ed, what are your thoughts on the Hokies right now?
They're so bad. Oh my gosh, they're so bad. I mean, they're just so bad. I have no idea I'm not going to beat this beat this to death. Pitt by like 17, Pitt by 24. We'll be lucky if we score 13 points. Pitt's not that great either. They just lost to Georgia Tech, but we can't score. And until I see any reason to think otherwise, I mean, I have no faith in us scoring more than 10 points a game. And do I think that Pitt will score upwards of 27 to 30? Maybe not. It depends which defense we see, because the defense early in the year for the Hokies was pretty good. The defense last week in Carolina looked just completely overwhelmed. And I don't think Carolina's offense is as good, or Pitt's offense is as good as Carolina's, excuse me. But I just have no faith in Virginia Tech's ability to put the ball in the end zone. Unless some of these receivers start catching the ball, and some of these linemen decide to open some holes for Keyshawn King or Bryce Duke, I just don't see how we can score enough to keep up with the 14.5, even though that is a huge number. It's ridiculous that I'm saying this, but until I prove otherwise, I got to go Pitt. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around any of this. And I'm looking at the slate. We've talked about a bunch of really good 3:30 games today, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to watch at 3:30 on Saturday? May need to pull down the second TV so I can have Virginia Tech off in the corner where they belong for right now. But I mean, I am encouraged by Daquan Wright and Bryce Duke and Mansour Delaney. These young guys playing pretty well. But we're just not even close to there offensively for me to have any faith in them being able to cover this spread. So I'm going to go with Pitt and hope I'm wrong.
I think you brought up a good point there with the young guys. And last week I used the analogy or the metaphor, I guess, of golf, right? So when you're in a round of golf and something's wrong with your swing, you're not going to fix it during the round, right? It's not going to happen. Virginia Tech's in that round of golf. All of the issues are not going to be fixed mid-season in practice. They're just not. There's not enough instruction time. There's not enough time in between games. These guys aren't going to get that much bigger, faster, stronger over week to week. However, the second most important part of golf, one, understanding what you can and cannot fix and when you can fix those. Very, very important to becoming a good golfer. The second most important thing to remember when you're golfing, actually maybe the first, is to realize when you suck, right? And to just take that in stride. And I think last week, something really important happened for the Virginia Tech program, because I think at some point in that game, Brent Pry looked to his left down the sidelines, and then he looked to his right down the sidelines, and he realized, oh my God, we are terrible. And then he did what he should have done. He honestly did what James Franklin, his mentor and former colleague, did at Vanderbilt. He just brought in the young guys. He said, you're talented. I'm going to put you in the game. You're talented. You're going in the game. You don't have experience. They're probably undersized. But he's throwing in these freshmen and sophomores and young guys to get playing time to build a program. I really loved that step that he took last week, because there's some of these guys who have been in this program for 4 or 5 years, and they're just not good football players, and we don't need to see them on the field anymore. We really don't. It's doing good for no one. And because of that, I think you're going to get a little bit of a spark somewhere that might help the Hokies out. I know they've been really bad. I think they're a really bad team, but you don't need to be that good to cover 14.5 against a Pittsburgh team that I think is still vastly overrated. So with that being said, I'm going to take the Hokies plus 14.5. They're not going to win this game. They're probably going to lose by 14, but that 0.5 is enough for me. So I'm going to go with the Hokies. Also, Malachi Thomas should be back in some capacity.
Red shirt Malachi Thomas. Petition to red shirt Malachi Thomas. I'm completely in agreement with our humble leader, Billy Ray Mitchell, on that one. There's no reason to play that guy.
I think if he's not to 100% by Thursday, you do red shirt him. I do think that. But if he's 100%, throw him out there. See what he can do, because a 2-back system with Malachi Thomas and Keyshawn King adds something to this offense that they simply haven't had. So Go for that. I'm going Hokies plus 14.5. I hate it. I hate it. They're disgusting. I hate watching them play. It makes me want to vomit. It makes me want to go get a degree from another college so I can root for their football team, but I can't do that. So plus 14.5. We're riding with them.
Sam, second week with the golf analogy. We're gonna switch your name, but we're gonna start calling you Chubbs here with your sage-like advice. So thank you for that. I'm surprised when you realize you suck, you didn't start saying to just begin slamming beers and break out the sleeve of Dunlops and enjoy your time there for the golf game. That's what I do.
If you haven't started drinking in this college football season for Virginia Tech yet, you need to start. If you start now, you'll probably sober up by the time the basketball team starts playing.
I can't argue with that. That's a great strategy. As previously mentioned, I just from Ed, I don't see a roadmap for not only just VT being able to win a game, but to just keep it close. The offense is just that bad. And as you alluded to, I don't know how you change that dynamic midseason. This is going to be a complete retooling or at least rebasing of who's on offense, who's starting, who's getting snaps, scheme, you name it. And I without just like maybe like a special advisor or someone coming in for the Hokies to just kind of say, hey, we need to start from scratch, and doing that maybe during the bye week, but not week to week. This is going to be something where they're going to have a little bit more time to look at it. So it's just a bad roster, at least on the offensive side. And the last two times we went in to Pitt with a bad roster, granted, I think it was more on the defensive side of the ball. It was 2018, 52-22 loss. And then 2020, 47-14 loss. And that was actually with a pretty good offensive roster at the time for both of those. So we're just not in sync and alignment, at least in terms of being a good overall roster. We just don't play well at Pitt. It's like going to BC. It's like going to Cuse. It's not a place we play very well on the road to start. And that's in lieu of, while Pitt doesn't necessarily have world-beating level of talent themselves, they're still pretty good, at least in terms of their front seven. That doesn't necessarily bode well for us to get the rushing game going this week. And it's not hyperbole at this point. VT basically, when you factor in rushing and passing, has the worst offense in Power 5 football. Yeah. That's not hyperbole. I'm not taking a whole lot of stock in the Georgia Tech game. I feel like that was just one of those random anomalies of coastal chaos. And if anything, it probably made Pitt even more mad to be able to come out and perform pretty dominantly in this matchup this week. So I do think that they'll be at least ready to play. The other one that I found is pretty alarming, 78% of the early action was on the Hokies. So I feel like there's just a lot of public misunderstanding of what actually they're looking at right now, which is this is a really bad offensive football team that I don't see a glide path to them. Like we talk about doing 30 burgers, 20. Try scoring 14, 2 touchdowns at least.
I don't think Virginia Tech scores 20 in this game. I think it's like 24-13 Pitt.
What I really wanted to look at was just historically how bad they are on offense, and then rate that out in terms of just other really historically bad offenses, at least in the ACC, because our listeners probably have more of a familiarity with some of the more historically bad ACC offenses. So right now we're on path to score 180 total points as a football team in 2022. That's bad. That's 18 points per game. Only ACC teams to score at or less than that margin since 2010. So we're thinking like last 10 years, but also, assuming not 2010, 2012, not the last 10 years, but also modern offenses like that installment of these new, more spread them out type offenses in the last decade. So 2020 Cuse was one of them, finished 1-10. 2019 Georgia Tech finished 3-9. Wake and BC in 2015 both finished 3-9. 2014 Cuse and Wake also both finished 3-9. And 2013 Wake finished 4-8. Another one was just looking back and just realizing, forgetting almost how bad Wake was on offense pretty much the entire 2010s.
I was about to say, what an awful stretch. Gosh.
The common denominator is just not a lot of wins out there. And these weren't teams that were trying to lose close. They were getting blown out pretty much across the board, other than that awesome 0-0 famous Virginia Tech game, which we were unfortunately a part of that. It's good to be a part of history, folks. Bottom line, this is modern college football. We alluded to it when we talked about the USC game. You have to be able to score to even have a competitive chance to compete. We hear it from Coach Pry every single week. You got to be able to compete, but you don't have the offense to even do that. So you can't compete. You are fundamentally incapable of competing with how bad this offense is. So I'm resetting my expectations and just thinking that we're just facing kind of an all-time kind of low in terms of my time of being a fan associated with Virginia Tech, and just how much and how bad this offense is. And when you factor in all of the equivalent talent, the new minds and philosophies and schemes from a mixture of experienced and inexperienced coaches, it's just the manifestation of just a lot of bad football right now in Virginia Tech. And going into this matchup, I just don't see how they keep it close, to be honest. Sad but true.
Well, let me pull up my notes here. Let me see the points that I wrote down. Okay. Misery.
Mm-hmm.
This is misery.
Mm-hmm.
Pitt stinks, but we are so much worse.
Yep.
Bet the under and pray the Hokies are at least still in it by halftime.
Yep.
Because this will be an ugly game. These offenses stink. I am tempted. I feel like logically, I actually am pretty tempted to take the Hokies and the points, because 14.5 is a pretty absurd spread for an offense that's as lackluster as Pitt's is. But I'm putting my flag down right now, and I am saying I am not picking Virginia Tech to cover a spread until they do it, because they have not proven that they can even hang in there with a Power 5 opponent besides Boston College, who sucks. So, yeah, I'm just taking Pitt. Emotional hedge.
No, that's fair enough. The Hokies are 6-12 against the spread since 2021. So not only have they been bad, they have been underperforming how bad they were supposed to be. So it's an uphill battle. Our friend Parker Stato War on Twitter has the Hokies projected at 4.24 points this weekend. But look, even a blind squirrel can find a nut. At some point, that deep ball to Caleb Smith is going to hit. At some point, something's going to happen. I don't think they're going to win the game. I don't think they're going to even play well, but I think this game is going to be a little bit closer than the Carolina game was. That's what I'm going with. Alrighty. Let's move into our special picks of the week. Some fun ones here, as you can see from our backgrounds. Our producer, Dom, that seems fun to say, our producer, he found some stats for Brett's game. So Dom, can you help us out with Brett's nutty pick of the week?
Yeah, I think I got some good stats for you here. We're looking at a grueling Big Ten matchup this week. Iowa at Illinois. Game total under is 35.5. We're taking that over under 35.5. We love the under. The under is 4-1 in Iowa's all Iowa's games this year. They have the 8th total defense, while Illinois got the 5th. So 2 really good defenses. Iowa's offense is also just atrocious. I mean, they're 130th out of 131 teams, ranked 130th. So very bad. I think we could see a similar game to like the 7-3 game against South Dakota State that Iowa had, something like that. I think all signs point under. I think the total could be 25, and I'd still take it. So under.
That's disgusting. That's absolutely horrendous.
That is certifiably insane, but it's definitely going to hit.
Virginia Tech and Iowa played, what would the game total be?
Oh, I mean, who even wants to think about that? That's just, who would watch
first to double digits wins? Like,
ooh, they could do like Elam scoring.
I think that would just bring about the apocalypse. Like, we would literally just travel back in time. Like it would just set civilization back a few centuries. They could play the game, but they would have to wear leather helmets from like 1920.
Yeah,
in fact, that'd probably be the only way I'd want to watch that game.
I don't believe there'll be many people watching the game.
Pretty bad. Pretty bad. All right, Ed, your southern deep fried game of the week.
Coming into the year, we thought that this game would be, one of the best games of the entire season. Turns out Texas A&M still bad. Jimbo Fisher still bad, even though he can recruit. But we have to throw this game on here, right? Texas A&M at Alabama, 8 p.m. at Bryant-Denny. After all the offseason drama, you have to talk about this. So I'm going to talk about it. Alabama's going to win by 24 plus, which is the line right now. The number one recruiting class of all time at Texas A&M. The history of college football recruiting, they have the number one recruiting class of all time. They are 3-2 and still favored to lose by 24 to Nick Saban. Roll Tide. That's all I got to say. Roll Tide. 8 p.m. in Bryant-Denny. I mean, give me Nick Saban just absolutely hammering Jimbo Fisher. Without Bryce Young. Without Bryce Young, I will add.
It doesn't matter. That dude that they brought in is a freight train.
That was Derrick Henry with an arm.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. I think I'm with you on that one. Bama by 30 plus.
I hope so. I would just love to see Nick Saban just destroy. I can't wait for the post-game handshake.
It's going to be great. Going to be great. All right. Well, my graveyard shift game of the week. This is a game that you need to stay up late for. I got him back here. Ed's trying to kill my boys. He's not going to do it. Oregon minus 13 at Arizona. Arizona's terrible. They're a bad football team. I'm fading Arizona. Yes, the game is at Arizona. It's not at Autzen Stadium, but it was a pretty stadium with a pretty sky, so I picked it. Also, Oregon, tough loss to start the year to Georgia. But since then, playing pretty good. They have a win against Washington State. They have a win against BYU. Oregon has a lot of football left to play. And I'm telling you, an 11-1 Pac-12 champ whose one loss is a basically true road game to Georgia, that's a playoff resume. So I know Bo Nix is not great, but he is playing better in this offensive scheme. And he has a lot of weapons around them. And defensively, Oregon flies around better than probably anybody in the Pac-12 athlete-wise. So Ducks by $1 billion against Arizona. By $1 billion. 13 is not nearly enough. They'll probably win this game in the 20s. So give me the Ducks.
That's billion with a B?
Billion with a B. Yes, this game will be at 9 p.m. Eastern on probably like Fox or something. You'll find it somewhere.
Pac-12 network that apparently
no, it's not
no
on
major
Pac-12
cable
network.
outlets get.
Yeah, it's not on Pac-12 network. It'll be on something.
That's good. That's good.
Chris, your captain's choice of the week.
Well, after what was a pretty disappointing LSU failure last week, thanks to Ed, I had to once again reach back into the well and remember the true spirit of trying to find value in the captain's pick of the week. And while I tried to find, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my background here. I tried to find on Division II level, South Dakota School of Mines. Turns out can't find them on DraftKings right now. So hopefully our DraftKings partners can find some action in the Division II market. But I didn't have anything that popped out in lines until the Paul Chryst news came out, and Wisconsin just inexplicably fired what I would consider to be a good coach who had a good track record and was just somehow having the kickoff to a pretty bad start to the season and had a pretty tough buyout to swallow for the Wisconsin football program. And I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means if they're trying to just hand the keys over to Jim Leonard, something they probably could have done in the offseason, let's be honest. I don't know if there's anything else going on there. But basically, to me, it just shows that Wisconsin's going on the road this week without any semblance of a plan in place. And if you follow social media, it caught a lot of the current players kind of off guard. So I feel like there's a weird dynamic in Wisconsin's football program right now. And it's not saying that they're going to go on the road to Northwestern, who stinks. Let's be honest, they stink. But the fact that they're an underdog at home by 10 points, and what I consider to be a very low scoring football game. Maybe Northwestern's going to play very well because they're able to show their shiny new plans for their $800 million stadium. My God, Big Ten money, if you're able to build a palace in Evanston, Illinois for that program, which is terrible. But that's what they're going to do. So I'm not even analytically looking at this game, other than the fact that I'm just going with emotion and sentiment of the program, which I feel like Wisconsin. I don't know if this is going to be, the quote unquote Ewing theory. If you ever listen to Bill Simmons' podcast of addition by subtraction, but I can't necessarily see that because Christ was a pretty competent football coach, an offensive one at that mindset. So having Jim Leonard lead the cause here as the interim guy with their defensive coordinator, I just don't see that translating to being able to score and cover a 10-point spread on the road against a common Big Ten opponent. So this will probably come back to haunt me because I'm betting on a very bad football team. But hey, that's what degenerates do. When you're desperate and you're trying to get your individual pick up a little bit, you got to reach into the well a little bit. So one common denominator, Northwestern football uses purple. I'm proud of my theme here. So very regal, associated with captain. I'm trying to kind of just justify for taking a inexplicable coach firing this week. So why not bet on misery?
Why not? Robert, round us out with your free money bet of the week. Give the people a winner.
Hey, I've been giving people lots of winners. 4-1 this year so far on my free money bets, which I suppose if they're free money, it should be 5-0, but I'll take it. So I'm going to look at Boston College here, 20.5 point dogs at home against Clemson. When I look at Boston College, I feel like to bring in our I think you should leave reference of the podcast. It's like the sketch with the game show, and there's the game show mascot, and he just doesn't know what he's supposed to do. And I feel like I'm the game show host yelling, "Figure out what you do." And yeah, because Boston College, what are they doing? They don't know what they're doing. They have looked awful all year, and then they pull out this win against Louisville. Whatever. I don't know. That's not a real football team. They need to figure out what they do because Clemson's really good, and 20.5 is probably half the number of points Clemson will win this game by. So my free money bet here, take Clemson minus 20.5.
Yeah, I came away from that Clemson NC State game just thinking Clemson's a really darn good football team because they manhandled, without one of their best players, they manhandled NC State up front on both sides of the football. So, yep, I like Clemson in that one. Well, fellas, it will be a really fun week. Hopefully the Hokies can figure some stuff out. Bold prediction. You guys ready for a bold prediction? Hokies will win a game in the month of October. They're going to win one of them.
Which one?
One of them. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know, man. I think they win one of them.
I mean, it's especially bold considering they have a bye in there. So
they might win one the rest of the year.
They might win one the rest of the year, but
win one.
Think, I got a feeling, right? They might lose the other two by 30, but I got a feeling they're going to pull one of these out.
They could potentially beat Miami. I don't know that they're going to win in the stadium behind me.
No, probably not. I mean,
where this past weekend we saw one of the greatest catches in college football I've ever seen.
Really filthy.
That really catch in that Liberty game was unbelievable.
It makes our receivers who are dropping balls that hit both of their hands right at their numbers. We should just have that on repeat the whole time.
Face. What you're meaning to say is right in the face. Where it hits you in the face.
Right in the face.
This area. Not here, but like right here.
I mean, they give them sticky gloves and everything, and they still can't catch.
Can you put Stickum on your face mask? Will that help? It'd be like the scene from The Little Giants when he gets the football stuck right in his helmet.
You know, there's people on Twitter who are like, if Grant Wells would have thrown that ball harder, it would have just stuck in his face mask, but he didn't do that. So, no, I think the Hokies pull one out. I think they won weird Coastal Chaos game. I think the Hokies are the bad Coastal team that creates the chaos this year.
Maybe they'll win on RSN for the Miami game. Maybe they'll win where no one can see it.
Probably.
Yeah,
All
stat
right.
just heard. It's the first time since 1995 that the Virginia Tech Miami game is not nationally televised.
Of course.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
That's disgusting. Well, that'll do it for week 6. Maybe we'll have some more positive Hokie talk week 7. Probably not. I'm probably dead wrong. But yep. Robert, regardless, sign us out.
Go Hokies.